Hey everyone, I'm Liz and today I'm going to show you how to crochet curly hair onto your dolls. This style of hair is made out of crocheted chains. You can make these in several ways to get a lot of different looks. For this doll, I've made thick spiral-shaped curls. For this one, I've made long waves. And for this doll, I've made short loopy curls. All of these were done in the same basic way, and I'll show you how to get that look in this tutorial. Some things you'll need for this tutorial are some yarn to use as your doll's hair. I'll be using black Aran weight yarn from Red Heart Super Saver, and plum wine worsted weight yarn from Caron Simply Soft. But you can use any yarn you like. You'll need a doll to add your hair to. You can find all my doll tutorials in the description below. You might also want to use a wig cap for your doll so that the color of the scalp doesn't show through the hair. If you want to do that, just click on the link on the screen to see my crochet wig cap tutorial or check in the description below. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a crochet hook, I'm using a size E, and a yarn needle. First I'm going to take my black yarn, again you can use any color you like, and I'm going to begin from the back of the doll's head, but you could start wherever you prefer. I like to start at the back on the right side. So I'm going to insert my hook into one of the stitches at the back of the head, above the neck. Then I'm going to pull up a loop of my black yarn, and I'm going to chain until I have double the length I want for my hairs. So I'm going to chain 10. Okay, I've finished with my chain of 10. Since this doll's hair is going to be made of loops, I've chained double the length I want the hair to be. For these other dolls with loose hair, I also added extra length to the chain to account for the curl. For this doll with thick spiral hair, I also chained double the length I want the hair to be because it needs to curl more. So I added 15 chains to my chain of 15 for a total of 30 chains. But this other doll with a more light curl, I only added half the length of the total length I wanted for the hairs. So I added 10 more chains to my chain of 20 for a total of 30 chains. So now that I've finished my chain of 10, I'm going to insert my hook into the third chain from my hook. And I'm going to pull up a loop. This next part will depend on how thick you want your curls to be. I'm going to do slip stitches since I want thinner locks for my doll. But if you want, you could single crochet, half double crochet, or double crochet instead for progressively thicker locks of hair. So I'm going to pull up a loop in the third chain from my hook and slip stitch. If you want your doll to have a lot less curly hair, you could just continue to slip stitch into each stitch of the chain, and the lock will naturally have a slight curl. Or if you want a doll with very curly hair, you could curl it even more by decreasing every stitch of the row of chains. This is what I've done with this doll here. I did my row with single crochets and decreased every stitch of the row to form these thick spirals. But since I'll be making this doll's hair with a little less curl, I'm going to decrease every other chain instead. So to decrease, I'm just going to skip a chain and slip stitch into the next chain instead. Then I'm going to slip stitch into the next chain because I'm only decreasing every other stitch, Then once again, I'm going to skip a chain and then do a slip stitch into the next stitch. Now I've gotten to the bottom of the chain with my decreases. Now I'm going to go back into that stitch that I started my chain on, and I'm going to slip stitch into that stitch to end my first lock of hair. With these two dolls, I just left the hair that I created loose to hang around the doll's back. But for this doll, I'm going to attach the end of each hair down to the wig cap to create a bunch of loops. This will create a short curly haired look. So to do that, I'm just going to pull a loop through the very tip of this lock of hair that I just created. And I'm going to slip stitch. And now I have this loop of hair. Now to start the next hair, I'm going to chain one, and then slip stitch to the next stitch over at the back of the neck. Now I'm going to chain 10 more to create my next lock. And then I'm going to once again slip stitch back down to the bottom, skipping every second chain. Alright, I've gotten back to the bottom of my chain row. So now I'm going to slip stitch into the bottom where I started the chain. And then slip stitch to the tip of the hair. Then I'm going to chain one, and slip stitch into the next stitch at the bottom. Then chain another 10 to create the next hair. And I'm going to continue to add hairs to the bottom row until I get to the opposite side of the wig cap from where I started. So I finished with every hair in this row. Now I'm going to start the next row. So I need to chain one and slip stitch to get to the next row up. So I'm going to chain one, then insert my hook into the stitch just above the row that I just finished. Pull up a loop, and slip stitch. And then I'm going to chain another 10, and do my row of decreased slip stitches to create another lock of hair. I'm going to be chaining 10 for each lock of hair I make, because I want each of my loops to be the same size. But if you're making your doll with loose hair instead of loops of hair, there's some things to consider. If you want to create layered hair, you should chain the same amount for every row. That way each row ends up at different levels. And if you want all the locks to end up at the same level, You should add 2 or 4 more chains for every row up from the bottom of the head, depending on how curly your doll's hair is. If the doll's hair is lightly wavy, just add 2 chains to each hair, and if the doll has thicker curls, add 4 chains to account for the extra decreases. For this doll, I chained 30 in the first row, then I added 4 chains for each row up from the bottom. So in the next row I chained 34, then in the next I chained 38, then 42, and so on. But for this doll, I'm just going to chain 10 for each hair in every row. Alright, I've gotten to the end of this row of hairs, and I'm going to continue to add rows of hairs to my doll's head until I get to the front of the head. Now I'm going to chain and slip stitch up to the next row, and chain another 10. So I finished all of the hairs on this doll's head. Now I'm going to slip stitch into the bottom where I started my chain. And slip stitch into the tip of the hair. Then I'm going to cut off my yarn. And sew in my end. Now all my dolls are complete. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, push the like button or share it on social media. I've also made another tutorial on how to make curly hair for your doll. This method is a more realistic look. I show you how to make basic curly hair and how to make ringlets of hair. If you want to see that tutorial, click the link at the end of the video or look in the description below. If you want to see my doll hair tutorial for straight doll hair, click the link on the screen or also check in the description. If you want to see more tutorials like this in the future, subscribe to my channel and I'll see you all next time. Bye!